For those of you who have not seen or heard any of the presentation stuff before this, my name is Matt Jared, and I am a sales engineer at Vercel. And the topic for today is that we're going to be migrating to Next.js Vercel for increased developer velocity. So kind of the focus that we have here today is to sort of talk about like larger picture things and to sort of like zoom out a little bit and see what it looks like for our development team's processes and see some of the technology choices that we can make and how that affects how our businesses work or how our organizations are going to work based on what our engineers are doing from day to day. And there's a ton of different things that we can dig into. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and click into a quick kind of overview. So talked a little bit about what we're going to get into, like very large scale things. We're going to talk about like if you're a director of engineering, if you are a CTO, CFO, anything like that, this is going to be the talk for you. If you're an individual contributor, this is also going to be a very relevant talk as well. So intros and goals is where we are today, or where we are right now, excuse me. Next is going to be the Vercel overview. We're going to talk kind of about Vercel. And then the two pieces that I think are going to be the most relevant to everyone here are the challenges of a legacy stack. So if you're on a legacy stack, and then the path to increasing developer velocity. So kind of like going from like maybe this situation isn't really working for us and why it might not be working for us and trying to provide some like context and numbers to those things. And then kick that into like, how do we actually fix this? And there's two pieces of that for the path to increasing our developer velocity and incremental migration to a front-end cloud. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. And we'll be able to kind of kick into really any questions that you might have about Vercel and kind of about like some of the methodology that I've had for all of this and how I kind of came to some of these conclusions. So my kind of challenge for all of you, I said this a minute ago, is if you just like, the big challenge for the day is like, let's just turn off Slack for like 30 minutes. Let's turn off our notifications for 30 minutes. Let's grab a drink. If you're eating lunch or whatever it might be, wherever you are in the world, just go ahead and like enjoy that. And like, let's just try and be in this moment as best we can here so we can kind of focus on what's happening. I found that this is also like a better way for us to really get engaged and understand. And if you are really engaged and you do have questions, if you could post those into the Q&A box instead of the chat, that would be better for us to be able to like kind of compile those questions. And then we'll get to those at the end. Okay. Sweet. So it kind of touched on some of the goals. I'm going to read through these just so we kind of know what this looks like for what we're going to kind of achieve today. So the first is we're going to talk about the benefits of accelerating the dev process. Most of this is going to be, again, like a very high level, but there's also some things that we can learn when if you are an individual engineer, excuse me, and talking about our developer velocity. We're going to talk about having a path to increasing our developer velocity and mitigating some of the risks that come along the way. The last two pieces, like I said, are going to be a journey to the front-end cloud. And I'll talk about the front-end cloud here in just a moment, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you guys have. A little bit about me. I'm a full-stack developer. I've been a developer for almost 12 years. I started my career in sales and marketing and went the learn-to-code route. A part of going the learn-to-code route is working at many different small organizations. First being Techstars. My role for a whole summer with Techstars was to be what's called a Hackstar. In companies that were really nascent in the very beginnings of their process and their like building out their software, came to me and we talked about building how things would go. Next was worked at the Zebra. I walked in the door as the 6th engineer and I left as the 60th. We have a fellow Zebra alum on hand here with who's kind of gone through this process. So thank you for joining here. And I also have my Zebra mug. Zebra's on the mind today. After I left the Zebra, I went to Atlassian. So many of you may have heard of Atlassian. This is where Jira, Confluence, Trello, a number of different software products. And when I went to Atlassian, I was the 600th engineer, and I left as the 6,000th engineer. That's a hard word to say. So going from like one or two people in a room all the way to tens of thousands of people sort of collaborating and building large scale software is kind of been a through line with my career. I've come to Vercel to work to help to enable teams to be able to move fast and build things. We don't want to move fast and break things. We want to move fast and build things. So that's my role as a sales engineer is to kind of help teams understand the business value of being really good at building software, right? If you want to see some open source repos that I have, a lot of Next.js sites are going to be at github.com/MattJared. And the typical ways you can just kind of Google me if you need to get a hold of me for whatever reason. So next what I want to talk about is the Vercel overview. So the Vercel overview that I have that states this the best is Vercel is the front-end cloud. That gives every team the tools to develop, preview, and ship at the moment of inspiration. Okay, there's a lot of different words that are crammed into this sentence, right? So let's break this down a little bit. Let's be like an AI transformer, right? Let's go through each of these words and kind of see what this means. Vercel is the front end cloud. Okay, what's a front end cloud? A front end cloud is the way that's going to enable a team to build and deploy a website really, really fast and really, really easily. Okay, we're going to dig into that in a little bit, but by way of Vercel being a front end cloud, we're going to give teams tools to develop, preview, and ship software at the moment of inspiration. Okay, so how many of us in the crowd have been, thinking like, I have this really amazing idea, it's going to be great, and then I go to open up a text editor, I go to write down my notes, or I go to do something, and it's just like too big of a hill to climb. It's too Sisyphean of a task for me to go handle. It's like, I just can't do it. Like, this is a cool idea. Maybe somebody will do this, right? So Vercel's whole aim is to sort of eliminate that like mountain. We want to put you halfway up the mountain to where your code and your ideas can get implemented, and you're already getting a leg up on the way to go ahead and deploy your software out into the world and deploy your websites and your web applications out to the world. Okay, so that's kind of what Vercel's aim is, but let's go back to the front end cloud. What I want to talk about is the two pieces that make up a front end cloud. Okay, on the left-hand side, we have our managed infrastructure, and on the right-hand side, we have our developer experience platform. Okay, so these two pieces are going to make up a front end cloud. But before we get into those two things, I want to talk about the actual words front end cloud. Okay, so front end and cloud, right? So cloud, when we think about anything that's a cloud service, is something that's going to be interacting with the internet. And it's going to be storing data off into an external service that we don't have to manage ourselves. This isn't something that's going to like sit in our garage that we have to like manage, and like if it lights on fire, I pour water on it and like then rebuild it again. This is something that's like, I'm not managing this. I'm partnering with a company that's going to help me manage this. I can see what's going on with it. I understand the underlying infrastructure, but I kind of can just let that company or that organization kind of handle that for me. The same would be true as like, I kind of understand that there's an engine in a car, and I kind of understand that there's seats in a car and a transmission and all these other things, but I don't necessarily need to be the one that builds it. Like, I'll go to Tesla or Ford or Toyota or whatever, and I'll just have them give me the car. Like, I kind of understand, like, I press the pedal and it goes forward. Like, that's enough for me. And I'll just be able to kind of get this off into like I'll be able to go to the grocery store just fine that way. I don't need to know like how like a transmission connects to some other thing, and I don't need to really know all that. I just need to know how to press the pedal, right? So this is kind of where like a cloud service is going to provide that for us. When we flip over to the other side, we see front end. This is everything that's a user is going to interact with, right? So this is the area where a lot of times in software development is a very nascent area, right? So this is something, if you think back like 5-10 years, websites are totally different than they were then, right? So the front end aspect of building things and deploying things to the cloud is really not been well maintained, right? It's not really been cared for as much as it should be. And this is where Vercel provides that front end cloud functionality. Okay, so this is kind of front end cloud, really high level. That's what this is. Now we have two pieces that make this, right? So the managed infrastructure, this is kind of like that car analogy I was talking about before. Like, I know like where the roads are, I know how to press the gas, but I don't necessarily need to go build the car myself, right? So this is where the managed infrastructure side is going to come in. So we're going to take your code, we're going to help you build your code, and we're going to help you deploy that off into the world. When that code is deployed off into the world, and remember, this is a front end application. This is going to be any sort of front end that you can do that can also interact with some backends and some services and things like that. And it's going to allow you to interact with a scaled, automatically infrastructure that's going to go all the way out into the world. You're going to deploy this out into the world for anyone to use, and it's going to be secure, and you're going to be able to observe this, right? So you're going to be able to see what's going on with my application. It's not some black box that we just like give to someone and hope that it works, okay? So the big key point here is that we're going to deliver high performance dynamic experiences on robust infrastructure. I don't have to manage that. The other side of this is the developer experience platform. So going back to cars, if I sit down in my car and it's very comfortable and the steering wheel's good and it plays the exact music that I want to play, and I kind of can like turn around and it keeps me cool in the summer and warm in the winter, this is the developer experience platform. So as a developer, when we go to build out our sites and we have this process of building software, I want it to be completely collaborative and efficient, right? I want to be able to go to any of my teammates and be like, hey, have you seen this problem that we're working on? Like, what does this mean to you? And instead of having to like fight the different tools that we are using, we just like all immediately have like the best in breed of like the tools that are available to us. And we have a really easy time going off and building that. So when we go off and build that, We're going to have a really fun experience here, and then we're going to chuck that up into our managed infrastructure, and we're going to have like a very, very fast way of deploying software. We're going to be very confident in that process too. So this is kind of the aim that I want to talk about going forward, is like, how can you insert a front-end cloud into this? Like, what does a front-end cloud actually do? Like, what does it actually look like in the day-to-day? So this is where we're going to kind of like go back in time a little bit. We're going to talk about some challenges of a legacy stack, and then we're going to talk about in the next section here about like what it actually looks like is our path to increasing developer velocity. So like, how does a front end cloud actually help me here? But before I can actually talk about how a front end cloud actually helps us, let's talk about like what it might look like today for someone who's using a legacy stack, who's not using a front end cloud. So the first side of that would be if you're in a monolith. So a monolith is a situation where you maybe have like your server, your HTML templates, a bunch of different things all crammed into one. And it's a huge ball of tape that you roll up and you roll it down a hill and you hope that it just like takes off into orbit, right? So this is like a really, really big, really thorny, really difficult to manage type of thing. It gets very difficult to scale, but it is really nice to start. Like a monolith is oftentimes really great for an individual who just wants to build something really, really quickly, or just wants to get something started and kind of see what's going on. But beyond that, like once you take one step up the staircase, that's great. But any other step beyond that, it gets very wobbly and very difficult to kind of make all the way to the top of that staircase, right? And this is another situation where we can talk about vendor lock-in, where it might be really difficult to, like, once you start walking up that staircase, the only way to get to the next flight of stairs or to the next level is by sticking with an individual vendor the entire way. Okay, so this is kind of the idea of a monolith. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. The next piece I want to talk about is manual integration. So this is the idea of how are we actually going to deploy our software into the world? How are we actually going to say, hey, I made some changes to this code. What's it going to look like for me to actually get this up into the world? I talked about this a second ago with the front-end cloud and in the managed infrastructure. But the process of actually building that and getting something into the front-end cloud, there's a lot of different ways that things can get really slow. There's a lot of high opportunity cost in that. And, you have to forgive me here. We're talking a little bit of a business term here that I learned many, many years ago, and I've never let it go, is opportunity cost, right? So what is that? My professors are going to be so happy with me when I talk about this. This is the cost by which we lose. Here, let me start over. This is the cost that we intake to not do other stuff. Okay, this is good. I'm going to pass the test on that one, right? So we have our opportunity cost. So like, it costs me a lot of money to not do stuff, right? So if I'm spending a ton of time like building up my code, trying to get it to work, hoping that it works, and it doesn't work, there's an opportunity cost there for me to not go do other stuff, right? So this is in a manual integration environment, that cost can go really, really, really high. Okay, and we're going to talk about this here in just a second, because let's get our hands dirty. Okay, we're going to start doing some whiteboarding stuff. I'm going to take a quick sip of water while I pull this up. And if you have any questions about anything so far, feel free again to drop that into the Q&A. So I'm going to hop into Excalidraw. So we have a completely blank canvas here. But what I want to talk about, let's go back to what we're going to talk about first. We're going to talk about monoliths, okay? So you can see here our first piece that we're going to speak about is monoliths, and then we're going to talk about manual integration. Okay, what's a monolith? How does working on a monolith work? An idea that you could consider if you're working on a monolith is any sort of like website builder, right? So you see a lot of ads for maybe something like, click a few buttons and you have a website made for you, or maybe a full stack framework that allows you to not really do much on your front end. It's going to give you a full server and a database and a bunch of different things all kind of piled up in one big ball of tape. Okay, so this monolith in the world of software development is not really something that we're going to want to use a lot. But if I'm just an individual developer, so here we'll just say, we're going to call this developer one, and I really have an amazing idea. We'll just call this developer one, and we'll get a smiley face here. And let's make our square a little bit bigger. So I am an individual developer here, and let's go ahead and merge these guys up. And that way we can use this over and over again. I'm going to group this selection. Okay, so I'm an individual developer. I have an idea, okay? I want to build a new site. I want to build acme.com or whatever it may be, okay? So let's actually just drop this down just a little bit. So I want to build acme.com. want to go build this amazing site. I want, let's make this green here, and I'm going to call this acme.com. I want my site to be amazing. I want to have all the best stuff. But this is just one person. This is just one developer to start. What we want to do is we need to have something in the middle here that's actually going to make this. So let's go ahead and use blue here. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to use a monolith. You know what? Let's go for it. We're going to just try to make something cool here. And this is going to be like a website builder. And this is great. Okay, so I have one developer, I'm one person, and I'm clicking some buttons on a UI, and a website builder is making this stuff for me, right? And there's some stuff that I can change around inside of here, but this is the day one, right? This is just the very beginning. What I want to do now is I want to add in a CMS. Okay, I want to write a ton of content because I want acme.com to have everything, the best of breed, right? This is my startup or my new project or whatever it is. I'm one developer. I'm pointing all of myself and all my work into this website builder. And then I'm taking this all out and I'm taking it to acme.com. This is a one step here. This is great. Like I'm kind of showing here is I have a CMS. This is fine. This is a good start. But I also have like a little bit of e-commerce on this, right? So there's like some stuff that people can buy. Whatever acme.com is, let's just say it's like a coffee delivery service. So I've got an inventory. This is okay, right? So I've got the inventory. This is all right. I'm doing some plugins. I'm doing some things here. That's like kind of like some off-the-shelf stuff that I can pick, like maybe a different package or something like that. I can jam into this. And then the other side of this is, okay, well, now I've got inventory. I now have a database that's going to live somewhere. And you know what? Because our coffee delivery service is actually like some bespoke thing that's going to make it for us to know what your taste profile is. We also have to have an API so we can have people be able to kind of like build their own services around this. And our complexity is growing, but you know what? We want to make sure our front end is a great experience. And then I also want to make sure that like my content gets cached when it's off into the world. I want to deal with that. That's going to be something that I really want to make sure based on like how things work. In the performance side, I want to make sure I have a really fast site. And then, I also want to be able to observe all this. So I have observability as a really high priority for me too. And you can see our big blue box here is getting really big here. This is starting to get a little bit crazy. So this is getting a lot bigger. Now, in turn, acme.com is getting a lot bigger. Okay. So acme.com is growing. This is awesome. But this is really hard for an individual developer to maintain. We've got observability, we've got inventory, all this other stuff. What else can we think of that we possibly need to work on? Oh, we probably need to have some reporting. Okay. Like, how do we, like, who's using this? Like, there's probably a marketer behind the scenes who's like really like interested and invested in like how to make sure that like our reports are going well and like we're paying for traffic that's actually relevant. And like, we want to make sure that we're like have, customers for life. So like probably like a CRM or something like that is going to be involved. So this one developer has this huge ball of tape that they have to maintain. So they've decided, you know what? Let's start hiring. I'll bring some more folks in. Let's see if my option, there we go. So we're going to start hiring. We're going to bring in another developer. And you know what? Just one developer is not enough. We probably need another developer. And just to make things a little more complex, we've gone on a hiring blitz. We've hired 4 new engineers. Okay, so our 4 new engineers, this is our new class of engineers. Everyone's going to be so excited, all the stuff that they have to build. And when we think about this, we went from 1 arrow building one thing to now 5 arrows. And this arrow over here, all of this is probably extremely complex because not only do we have these 5 developers, we also are going to have, let's go ahead and just pop this guy over. We're also going to have designers. We're also going to have, product people by this time. Product. What else? Probably QA. At this point, we want to make, this is our coffee delivery service or whatever example you want to come up with. We'll probably drop in some QA here. And all these folks, and then not to mention the business. Forgot about the business. So how could I forget the business? My business professors are going to be so upset with me. I did so good explaining opportunity costs. I almost forgot them. So anyway, so we have all these people relying on this one pipe, right? So there's just one pipe for how things are going to go through. So we have to make a change to CMS. developer one, who's definitely, our lead developer now, our CTO, whatever you want to call them, they're definitely sweating, right? Let's get sweating face. This is their look, right? So they've got to make sure that all of these other folks who are relying on this have the ability to make changes quickly. And when we make those changes quickly, what we want to do is we want to get those out with some confidence that it's actually going to work. Okay. So this is where a monolith gets really dangerous and really tricky, because what we have is the ability for us to actually do things like I'm saying quickly or with any confidence. Really, we're not doing it with any confidence at all, because anything that one person does could completely tumble over for for everybody else in the team, because all of these different pieces are sort of mushed together. There's, like I'm saying, I've been using this term, a ball of tape. Like each ball of tape is just kind of like jammed in together. So this is really risky when you're inside of a monolith and you're using, hey, my front end or back end are coupled, and I have all these other tools that somebody's just like kind of like given to us, right? And we don't really have a choice on how we're going to use things. So like I mentioned the term vendor lock-in, or like there's really no kind of like concept of me being able to do things quickly. I'm not very agile, right? So then I want to talk about how we're actually going to like let's double click on this pipe and what this pipe looks like. So this is where we talked about earlier, and then we're going to go to another little blank area here. We're going to talk about manual integration. In this pipe right here, so let's remember we have 5 developers, and maybe this is wrong. Maybe we have 50 developers. Maybe we have 10 developers. We have 2 developers. Whatever it is, this pipe right here, we have to get all of this code, change it, and then get it up into acme.com somehow, right? So the process that I think a lot of times we might see is something where we see manual integration. And this is oftentimes, we're going to go ahead and do a deploy once a month. Okay. And our developers, let's bring our development team down here. Let me grab this crew. This guy or gal, our main developer, is sweating because they're in charge of a lot of different things going on. But one thing, we talked about the business a second ago. We brought them back in. We do a little organization here on these. What we're going to do here is when we talk about developers, let's look at it from a business point of view. And we're going to change these all to be how much they're getting paid. Because ultimately, this is, at the end of the day, dollars, right? So a developer where I live makes maybe about $100 an hour for 8 hours a day. And then, give or take with bonuses and stock options and healthcare and, whatever it might be. Let's just imagine that for every single day that someone's on our team, we're going to pay them $1,000. Okay. So for this process, let's just kind of think about what this looks like here. If we change all these names from developer to $1,000 a day, and this doesn't count for, it could be lower than this. You might be living somewhere else where it's, extremely cheap to live or even more expensive. I don't know. Again, it's just a little bit easier to kind of just use this as $1,000 a day. You can change these numbers to be however you want. For our purposes, we'll stick with $1,000 a day. Okay. So this $1,000 a day is going to point to this arrow right here. Okay, so how are we going to get this arrow out in the world? So what we're going to do is, we're really smart, we're really risk averse, and what we're going to say is we're actually only going to do this. We're going to do a deploy from our monolith. So we have our monolith here. Let's go ahead and make sure we have an account for our monolith. Let's make this red. And we're going to call this our monolith, our code base, whatever it is that you want to kind of think in your mind. It could be any kind of monolith, and we're going to have a deploy. Okay, and we're going to do this once every 2 weeks. So once at 2, or let's just say like twice a month. Bi-monthly is a tricky one. We don't need to get into the bi-monthly conversation on this talk. That's a whole other live demo. Okay, so we're doing this twice a month, and our team, we decided that we're going to deploy on Wednesdays or Mondays or something like that. But essentially, what we're looking at is our team has decided that we're going to bundle up our code and build it only once a month. So what I want to do here, and I'm going to put like a blue around this. So what this looks like right here is this is Monday. Okay. So here's Monday. And what this equals to is $5,000. Okay. Here's Monday. All right. Monday's come and gone. Everybody is basically checked in their work for the day. This is what we are contributing to the team. And we want to have this go ahead and sit here. Okay. Then, Monday's come and gone. Let's go ahead and let me highlight this. Here comes Tuesday. All right. Tuesday, same thing. Everybody makes the same amount on Tuesday than they did on Monday. There's $5,000. I think you might be able to see where I'm going with this. Here comes Wednesday. Going to keep building out our code. Going to keep working on our monolith. Okay. Here's Wednesday at 5,000. Okay. So ultimately what we have here is, I'm not going to keep going here, but you can see what this is going to equal to. And I spelled Wednesday wrong. So, hopefully you didn't tell my preschool teachers about this one, or my elementary school teachers. My college professors are proud of me. Preschool, not so much. All right. So what we have here is at $5,000 a day for 10 days. We have a $10,000 or $50,000 pile of code. And you might be saying to yourself, well, yeah, this is less risky. This is the way to go. $50,000, we're going to do a deploy twice a month, and then it's going to go out to acme.com. So I'm going to ask you a question. What does this look like? Let me get a background of a green, just a different color, and this is acme.com, just so we can see. So we can see here, this $50,000, when it goes well, this is great. So we've taken a $50,000 investment. Let me change this back to black. We have a $50,000 investment that's going in on our deploy twice a month. This is going to go ahead and go through. And after this deploy works, acme.com hopefully will have that $50,000 investment. And I said like a coffee delivery site, but you can come up with whatever example it is. If you had 5 developers and you're going to hand them a $50,000 check, you would want to make sure that it goes into acme.com and works really well, right? So being a software developer for many years, a deploy never works in the way that you want it to on the first try, right? It's not always like it's kind of like in the software development where we need to be a little bit more cautious and safe about what's going on. So when you're deploying large amounts of code and tons of people's work, let's imagine here that on Tuesday, this went bad. Okay, somebody did something wrong on this day. In our deploy twice a month, instead of it being twice a month, this deploy went bad. Okay, this is now a red X. This went bad. Everything's bad. Okay, and what we've done is we've had to do a hot fix. Or what we've done is we've had to revert our code, and we're going to say, hey, next month or next deploy, we're actually going to do better, and this is going to work this time. But what's actually going on is we are now looking at a $100,000 problem. And this $100,000 problem is just that we're going to hope that our code works, right? And we're going to hope that all of this $100,000 that we've given into acme.com is going to turn into more money from acme.com, okay? So these are some of the risks that we're looking at when we're talking about a monolith and we're talking about manual integration. Okay, so let's go back. Let's do a quick review. We have a 5 developer team. We have a designer, product, QA, business. They're all relying on this one skinny little pipe to get something out into acme.com and to get their work into the world. This can be dangerous and tricky because there's really nowhere for a lot of these things to go because we're kind of just like there's a big log jam. So then when you actually get into say like, hey, let's make the pipe bigger, like how does the pipe actually work? Well, if we say we're only going to deploy every couple of weeks, or we can only deploy once a day because there's so many disparate moving pieces here, what happens is if anything were to go wrong with this big pile of code that we try to roll into the website, then the amount of investment that goes into what's actually going to get rolled into the site gets larger and larger and larger. And that risk grows exponentially, right? Because the longer we go without a deploy, the more risk the next deploy is going to actually entail. Okay. So let's go back to our slides. This was the challenges of our legacy stack. Let me share really quick. This was the challenges of what we're looking at, right? So how do we actually fix this? How do we actually make this any better? And I think you might be able to see where this is going. And this is the idea of going with a composable stack. So this is the idea of using a front-end cloud here. So we're going to do some more whiteboarding here in just a second. But the idea of being able to plug and play is really, really powerful because we don't have to block off whole areas of our organization for just one big piece of code. We're going to have small, more calculated pieces of code. It's going to give us a lower overhead, and we're going to be more procedural in our changes. We're going to know, like, okay, we're changing this part of the website, our coffee service or whatever it is you have in your mind that you want to build is going to be very, very procedural because we're going to know what we're changing. Instead of, hey, we're going to change 2 weeks worth of work and it may or may not work, and we may or may not have like a huge cost to this. It might work. I don't really know. We're going to know what's going on, right? We don't want to hope that things are going to go well. We want to know that things are going to go well. Okay, the second piece of this, and if you've been in engineering for a little while, you should know CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment. So this is kind of the opposite. This is the inverse of manual integration. So this is where we're going to have a lower cost. We're going to accelerate our development velocity, and it's going to be failure friendly. Like we talked about earlier, it's like we don't want to move fast and break things. We want to move fast and deploy things, right? It's okay to fail, but we want to be able to fail and fix it really quickly, right? We don't want to just fail and then walk away, right? Nobody wants that. You go to the grocery store and something falls down, there's a huge mess, and you just walk away. Like, that's not really what we want to be doing, because there's a lot of money on the other side of this, right? There's a lot of investment and time and energy that's gone to building our software. So we want to actually turn that into a return. Like, we want to have that come back to us in our business or our organization or whatever it might be. Okay, so let's go back to the whiteboard. I'll go a little bit faster with this next piece here. We've got about a little over 10 minutes to go. So thank you guys for sticking with me. And I'm going to talk about kind of like what it looks like to actually to implement some of these things. So we're in a monolith here, and we have all these big squirrely pieces, and we have our developers. Okay, so let's bring our development team over. We've got our developer, our main developer gal is sweating because there's so much going on, and it's just kind of, really hard to actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over a whole team. I can't leave the designers and the QA and the business behind. Let's go ahead and bring these guys over. Stick with me here while I'm drawing around. If you ever see me do this in person, I'll do it on a whiteboard, and you'll just be amazed at my drawing skills. Okay, so we have our development team, and over here we have our monolith. So instead of a monolith, let's think about Composable or a front-end cloud. Okay, so instead of a monolith, it's going to be jammed in, and it's going to hopefully work, and they're going to be stepping on each other's toes all the time. We're going to bring in a front-end cloud, and instead of this having a green background, I'm just going to give it a green stroke. So you can actually kind of see, actually, I'll just make this, might be a little distracting. So let's make this black here, and I'll thicken this up a little bit. So what you can see inside of a front end cloud is, instead of everything being in this gigantic list here, where we're listing all this stuff and we have to use this, what you have the option to do is you can pick and choose the different pieces inside of your front end cloud. Okay, so I want to have a CMS. So let's make our CMS, give it a blue background. Let's make the stroke small. I want to have a CMS. Okay, this CMS is not managed by my front-end cloud. This is a CMS that's an external service. Okay, so let's draw an arrow off to whatever it is. Name your favorite CMS. And then this is an external service. It's an external service, whatever it is. Name your favorite CMS. Same for database. You know what? My front-end cloud provider, I'm wanting to use a different database from them today, just because. Okay, so here's my database. And same thing, it's going to be an external service. We're going to bring this over. And these two pieces are going to talk to external service. Our front end cloud is going to bring in those pieces, and it's going to bring in that data from our database and our CMS. So let me move these down a little bit. And it's going to allow us to sort of collaborate outside of our front end cloud. But our front end cloud is going to consume that, and it's going to build that, and then it's going to deploy it for us. Okay, so here's when we talk about going headless or being in a composable stack. This is where, whoa, getting all over the place. Oh my goodness. This is a live demo for very good reason, so we can have fun things like that happen. Okay, here, let's go. There we go. Come on, click for me. Perfect. Cool. All right, next here is acme.com. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. So what we're talking about here is acme.com is still going to have the ability to be really fast, and it's still going to be able to do a bunch of different things. But just because a database and a CMS is somewhere else doesn't mean that it's any less. It's actually going to allow us to be faster, because let's remember, we have our product and our designers and our QA and our business, and we've added a marketing team now because the business has 2 exclamation points. The marketing team's going to get 4, just because I'm a marketer at heart. They're going to get 4, and instead of them having to fight inside of the monolith with everybody else, what's going to happen is we're going to be able to actually just point them straight to the CMS. We're going to say, hey, you guys, you don't really need to come into the front end cloud if you don't want to. Oh my goodness, I'm getting all over the place with my little cursor thing here. Perfect time for my arrow guy to fall over on me. Let's see if I can get this working. If not, we'll just move on. Amazing. Okay, so this marketing team is going to be over here inside this external service. But these developers, remember, they still have to edit code and change code to do all these different things. Let's have them come in here, and we're going to have, Next.js as our application. So Next.js is going to be inside of here, and they're going to work with Next.js. And inside of Next.js, they're going to be able to manage the front end. Okay. they're going to have access to a API layer inside of this, so they can do some stuff. They can do some API stuff if they want to. But also, what's cool about this is, if I build an API here in XJS and I want to talk to an external database, that's totally okay. And let's make these green just so you guys can see that there's a little bit difference between an external and internal service. So I have an API that's an internal service. I'm talking to an external database, totally fine. And I'm talking to, on my front end, a CMS, which is also an external service. And I can go ahead and collaborate in here, but my developers can work on all sorts of different pieces here. Another thing that I could put inside of this would be our reporting. So I could say, like, our reporting is here. And I also want to do maybe some observability. Observability. Let's just call it O11Y just to make my life easier. Okay, so we're going to call this O11Y. And let's actually move this down to here. So we can see Next.js is going to run these things for us. And our observability and our reporting is going to be given to us by our front-end cloud, okay? And this is where Vercel fits really well. Because we're going to be able to help you build all of that reporting that you might need, or any of the observability that you might need. But if you say, hey, I really actually prefer a different service for this, or, I have this external service, this is some other thing, I'm actually going to change this to a different one today. There's no gigantic migration that needs to occur when you do this. What you're going to do is you're just going to change the service, and your front-end cloud's going to consume the external service the same way, and you're going to deploy that off exactly how you were previously. Okay, so this is really the power of being inside of a front-end cloud. Is this pipe right here that's often given and passed off to Acme.com is the managed infrastructure. Okay, so this is where it's like, I don't really need to know how all these pieces are going to fit together. My framework is next, or whatever front-end framework I choose to use. I don't need to be an expert in that, but I know that I have all these different moving pieces. We're going to go ahead and build those for you and deploy that off into the internet for you. Okay, so the next side of this is we have all of our squirrely manual integration. There's all this stuff. We have a $50,000 check every other week that we're handing over to developers, and they may or may not light it on fire. So what are we going to do? So let's grab our development team. And by this point, this developer is, we'll get it to here. This developer is switched back to having sunglasses. Sunglasses, how do I do emojis? Let's go back to sunglasses for this developer right here. So they're happy again, okay? So our development team, and we'll really quickly here through these next pieces, is what we're gonna do when we get to this pipe right here is we're gonna have a continuous integration and continuous deployment environment. Okay, so here's where CI/CD comes in. Oh. So our 5 developers, whoever they might be, they're going to come in here. We have CI/CD. And when we have a CI/CD environment, what we're going to do is we're going to point all of our code into a front-end cloud. Okay. And when we have a front-end cloud, our code is going to tell us, our front-end cloud and our continuous integration, continuous deployment environment are going to tell us what's going on. So our builds, so we'll call this a front-end cloud. We get some text in here, so front-end cloud. So we're going to have some text in here that says front-end cloud. And what this is inside of here, it's going to show us our builds. It's going to show all of our builds. It's going to give us preview environments. It's going to give us observability into how our site actually works. So I'll go again with observability. We can actually see inside of our front-end cloud here, our developers are going to be pointing their code into here through their Git provider. So whichever Git provider that you're going to use, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. I sat down the hall from Bitbucket for many years. So let's just say like your Git provider. You're going to work exactly how they normally would work. Point their code into a GitHub, git add, git commit, git push. And then from there, our front-end cloud is going to consume all of that. So we're going to consume everything that's inside of this Git provider. And then we're going to point that off into the world. And when you do that and you deploy frequently, this is what we're going to talk about here in this last section, is when you deploy frequently, you're going to be able to have more agility and you're going to have a higher development velocity. So let's point some arrows here and I'll move on to the next piece and we'll open up for Q&A here in just a minute. But when we have our development team, we're going to be pointing these arrows in one at a time. And then when you see Acme.com here on the other side, the new and improved Acme.com, go ahead and make this bigger. Instead of doing gigantic pipes that go through and we may, remember going back to here, we may or may not actually have something that comes through. On the other side of this is this developer does this work, and this unit of work goes through this system that's going to show them their build, and it's going to show the other developers their builds, and it's going to be able to interact with different pieces. And then the last piece of this is it's going to point itself off to Acme.com. So every single one of these, this is a $1,000 investment rather than a $100,000 investment, okay? And we're going to do this every day. And the idea that we do this frequently, we're going to do this 20 times a day if we can, right? We want to do this a lot because we're going to be able to fail. And if we fail, we know why we failed. So remember when we had this big problem of somebody on Tuesday broke something, but we didn't know about it until we tried to deploy that. This is really risky and dangerous. Imagine if you missed the deadline because something was broken, right? That you just didn't know about. Okay, so let's come back over here. And imagine that something I did right here as this developer or whatever developer was broken, and I knew immediately what was going on. So this is where it's going to show me. This is why Frontend Cloud, when it shows you your builds and it shows you when you have a really clean CI/CD environment, you're going to be able to see what's going on immediately. Okay, how do you actually do this? Okay, incremental migration to a Frontend Cloud. Let's go really quickly here. I only have a couple minutes. I started talking a lot, but the idea behind this is that we're not going to boil the ocean. We're not going to say, okay, everything needs to be done. Let's go back to our whiteboards. Everything needs to be done. We're going to change from this to this tomorrow. And you guys need to stay up all night, and here's some pizza and some coffee, and best of luck to you, right? That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is have an incremental migration. And what we want to do is we want to be very intentional about that. And you don't have to take all of your routes in your entire application and bust out of your monolith tomorrow. The best way to do this would be to identify individual routes or individual URLs or individual pages or an individual project and get started there. So this is like we talked about going up the steps earlier, right? So let's say you're at the top flight of a staircase after you've gone up through a monolith, and you're turning around and you're going to go up to the next flight of stairs. The idea isn't that you're just going to like chuck everything down to the very bottom of the stairs and then hope that you get back up. The idea is that you're going to take another step over, and instead of it being completely in the monolith, we're going to be like adding one step into the front-end cloud. And then we'll slowly build in from there. We'll go very, very slowly, incrementally, and we're going to be very precise as we go through this. Okay, so if you're going to do this with Vercel and Next, inside of the next config.json, or next.config.js or the Vercel.json, we have the ability to sort of act as the quarterback behind the scenes, where we can say, okay, we've taken in a request for acme.com/API. And acme.com/API is actually on our front-end cloud. And this is where this is managed that way. And it's managed in our API, and our API is managed there. And we're going to do this as a trial and see how it goes. And then we're going to slowly sort of like build out into the rest of our organization and slowly migrate away from our monolith. Okay, so I was going to do a little bit of whiteboarding, but I went over on some of the other stuff. We could kind of hop into this at another time. I would love to answer any questions that you all have in the chat if there are any. If there aren't any, I can let you guys go. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you all so much for your time in talking about this. And this is a really interesting thing that we talk about pretty much every single day at Vercel. So if you have any other questions that maybe aren't inside of here, inside of the QA box, or if you want to talk with us a little bit more, hop into vercel.com/contact/sales. And this will be a way for us to kind of like have a longer conversation. Like maybe you're not in a monolith, maybe you're just in a slower development environment for whatever reason. This is something that we are specialists in, and we talk about this with customers all day long. So please feel free to reach out here. And if there's any other questions, Jasper, you said wait. Could you follow up in there if anybody has any Q&A? I could go back if there aren't any questions, and we can continue on with our incremental migration to a front-end cloud. We can sort of talk about this some more. Let me go into the Q&A. What benefits do we get deploying Next.js Next.js app on Vercel over AWS? So the first benefit that I see is when you're living in this. Let me do a little bit of whiteboarding here. So the first benefit that I see is that when you're in Vercel, using Vercel to deploy, your box is going to look like this to do this. So you're going to have your development team. Remember our developers. Let's say we're going to use Vercel for this. And what I have here is Vercel in a front-end cloud is going to be here. What we have here is next I'm going to have Vercel in the middle. Excuse me. Here we go. Vercel is here. and then acme.com is here. So there's basically just 3 boxes, right? So any idea behind load balancers, any concept behind an API gateway doesn't exist in Vercel because we handle that for you. So the idea here is what you're going to have is you're going to be able to plug and play immediately. So you're going to say, hey, I'm on Vercel. I have my team up and running, and I'm going to take my Next.js code, and by way of what's called framework-defined infrastructure, Vercel is going to understand what your code looks like and deploy that off into the internet sort of for you, right? So this is the idea where these pipes are all going to be very clean and very easy to use. Okay, so with AWS, what you're going to be looking at, and I have an example of this, with AWS, what you're going to be looking at, and I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this and paste. So let's go down here. This is what it looks like with AWS, okay? So inside of AWS, I have my code here. I've got my next, this is where my code is. I've got my build pipelines, my CI/CD, my test runners. I have to build all of these my own. Remember, on a front-end cloud, when we come back up here, all of this is built for us, right? Everything is going to be, we're just going to consume a Git repo. And then we have our cloud platform here. But inside of that cloud platform, there's no idea of a framework-defined infrastructure. So you have to do these framework optimizations. You have to set up observability. You have to set up your database and your CMS, similar to how you would do with a front-end cloud. You have to go choose what those are. So it's just another layer of things that you have to do. And when you interact with those, you have to build out your API gateway. Now, finally, after doing those things, what you're going to have to do next is have you're going to have static resource caching that you're going to have to set up. Because remember, this is not a front-end cloud. This is a managed service that does a million amazing things, but it's not specialized for Next.js. So this complexity that you have, where you have to manage all these different pieces, yes, that is, they could deploy your site, but there's just a lot of other stuff that you have to do. On Vercel, what you're going to have is 3 boxes, right? So your developers are going to be working inside of the your Git repository. Vercel is going to consume your code, build it, and deploy it for you. Along the way, as you build your code and you have your CI/CD pipelines built out, it's all going to be made for you, right? And it's not just some big black box that we're not going to talk to you about. You're going to have observability, you're going to have reporting, you're going to have monitoring, you're going to have analytics, you're going to have speed insights, all built alongside with you that you're going to have access to the whole way, okay? So let's go to some other questions. Just answered this one. Working in an agency environment, knee deep in WordPress, what does my migration path look like? Okay, great. All right, so if you're an agency and you're knee deep in WordPress, you're looking at this. You're in this all day long, right? You've got these big pieces here. So the idea of a monolith and the idea of manual integration is something that, like, as an individual contributor, you probably have a lot to say about. You probably can be like, hey, well, this is like really difficult. This is really tough. The idea that I would come up with for this case is I would actually present a front-end cloud as the CMS inside of WordPress. And inside of here, I'd say, okay, here's WordPress. What we can do is we can actually use Next to consume WordPress. We can actually use our Next.js WordPress starter and say, like, hey, the content's not going to change. The content's going to stay in WordPress. What we're going to do is we're going to take that out. We're going to take this out of the templating layer, and we're going to drop ourselves into Vercel and Next, or whatever front-end framework that you choose, and we're going to consume that data and build it and deploy it off onto Vercel. Okay, so this is probably easier said than done, right? You're probably thinking, hang on, yeah, that's great. I love that theory, but what can I actually do? And the idea is, if we go back to our integration ideas, let's just pick one route, okay? And what we can do is on WordPress, or depending on what your service is or that you're using, what you can actually say is, like, instead of it being your whole entire blog inside of WordPress, let's just pick one route. And let's have that WordPress router, I believe it would be Nginx. Let's have Nginx point to Vercel and actually say, like, here's just one page. Let's slice off one piece of pie. We don't need the whole pie. Let's slice off just one piece of pie. And let me show to the business and the organization what I can do to actually improve this. And if you're an agency, so those are 2 ideas. And then the third idea would be, let's come up with an idea for, like, a very small project that's going to be a very, like, the cost to the business or to the agency isn't as high, where we can say, okay, this small piece of work that we're going to do for XYZ client, let's try something new. And let's just do this as a proof of concept for now. Vercel has a very generous pro tier where you can just do something for a small team. You don't have to have, all the bells and whistles that would come with an enterprise agreement. However, you're going to get all the bells and whistles that come with Vercel, right? You're going to get the front-end cloud for a relatively low amount of money. So if you have any questions, let's talk to me more, talk to us more. Vercel.com/sales. I know we only have a couple minutes to go. But that's just a couple ideas for the WordPress idea. And then there's some documentation I can send. I would also look at the Frontend Cloud, the Frontend Cloud Advantage. I would possibly, share that with your leadership at the agency as well. I'm going to talk about that. Okay, just answered that. Would you recommend incremental move to headless WP with Next.js or cut over to Builder IO with Next? I kind of answered this a second ago. So it depends on the situation, okay? So we have, let's go back, gotta have our whiteboard, okay? So if you already have a bunch of data in WordPress and you have thousands and thousands and thousands of pages in WordPress, keep it in WordPress. That's what I would say. And then incrementally come over and say, okay, we're gonna now just consume, instead of WordPress being in here, we're just gonna consume that page here. If you're kind of in the middle of like, hey, this is a new project, there's a couple pages in WordPress, let's go to Builder and we're going to use Builder plus Next or whatever framework in Vercel. What I would say is try and cut over there. So there's like, you don't know until you know, right? Is the amount of WordPress pages that you have really, really, really large, or is it kind of small? Because what you can do is you can actually just start by consuming that WordPress content straight in Next in Vercel without having to do any overhead, right? Like you can just change, you can just point to whatever CMS that you want. Your templates in Next and how you sort of structure your content are going to be the exact same as when you go to migrate over. So what you can say is we're going to start with WordPress, headless WordPress. We're going to get this up on Next, and then we're going to flip our CMS out from WordPress to Builder. And then we're going to migrate our content over, or we can do both, right? So it's a front-end cloud. I can have multiple CMSs, right? So I can have two CMSs, that's two things. So, I mean, this can go on to infinity, right? It just doesn't have to be one. What I can do is I can say, let's make our blog content to start on WordPress because there's already a ton of blogs, and let's build out some pages on Builder. And then we can slowly sort of oscillate between the two depending on the needs. And then we can say, okay, we're going all in on Builder. Let's start migrating some of this content over from WordPress. And we can still build in the same world inside of Next. We can just pick and choose where our content's coming from. Okay, that's just another idea. Reach out to us afterwards if that doesn't help, because I think that's an interesting use case. Okay, what is we talked about that. Okay, how do we make most use of Next.js if we were planning to adopt it as a framework for our new project? The best way to use Next.js is to use Next.js. I will say that the very best way to learn Next.js right now is nextjs.org/learn. And I'll throw this into the chat. This is really, really useful. We're planning to adopt it as a framework for our new project. I would say go through the nextjs.org/learn. Go through this course if you're looking to learn Next. This is a fantastic resource. It's going to go from the very beginnings of Next, and also if you're not very familiar with React, it's going to allow you to sort of see some of the React foundations as well. And you're going to be able to kind of see what it looks like to build with Next. And then you can apply that at scale. So as you get larger, these are kind of like the basic pieces of stuff. And then you'll be able to kind of go larger out from there. If that answers. Yeah, and there's a few good courses on Udemy. And I would also follow Vercel, all the Vercel personalities on Twitter and YouTube. So in the Vercel YouTube is very, very good. We have a number of DevRels. If you're interested in some more kind of like context, just reach out to us on here, vercel.com/sales, and we can get you set up on that. The best way to use Next, and this is coming from me, like coming from a traditional like HTML, CSS background, where a lot of work being done on front end and then slowly getting into further and further into the React ecosystem and into all this, is the best way to get better is to just build 100 websites. And this is something just like, they can be the smallest possible thing, but the more you build and the more you kind of get going, the better I think life will be as you sort of like understand different use cases, right? So, and Vercel is perfect for this because what you'll do is you'll just create a Next.js application, go build, a blog or a to-do list application or a personal site, whatever it might be, chuck it into Vercel and deploy it, and then go build another one and just keep going, right? So like I said, our hobby and pro tiers are very generous, and there's just so much to learn that the Next team and our DevRels like kind of like post out into the world. So just keep in the ecosystem and keep up with us. File it, put in a request here, and we'll send over some more stuff too. Okay, in a short lapse of time, how web apps can automatize their developments into a front-end cloud. Depends on what you're using. So I will say, let's imagine So what the question I think is saying is, in a short amount of time, how instead of doing like something like a very slow migration, how can I like actually get into a front end cloud? Okay, so the idea here is, let's come on over to the front end cloud. Let me kind of delete all my arrows. The idea here is that you can already be on. So let's imagine that your API and your database, let's flip this from being internal and let's make this external, right? So this is like, let's say like a Rails API or a Django API or something like that. And this actually lives outside of our application, right? So this is an external service. Let's just call this is all over here. What you can do is inside of Next, you can make your own API routes. So, a route handler. So I'm going to make this green. So this is like my Next API. So I'm going to call this another API. And what I can do is I can actually start consuming this backend. And what I can do is I can decouple my front end and my back end. And this is where the idea of composable comes from, or the front, what we talk about with the front end cloud, is where we can say, I have this API and I have Next.js and I have my front ends built out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave my back end somewhere else. And I'm going to use Next.js and route handlers to go and consume that data and then present that data as my front end. So now you've kind of just like worked your way into doing this, because your front end and your back end are decoupled, but they're not completely isolated from each other. You still have to send data back and forth, right? You still have to consume content or display content. So what I would think about is, how is your front end built today? What does your back end look like? Is it like a Rails app, a Django app? Does it just have an API sitting there? If so, that's perfect. Leave that how it is. Don't touch that. On your front end, if it's in React or if it's in some other similar framework, let's think about getting that over into Next, deploying that up to Vercel, and then consuming that data through API routes inside of Next. So that way we can securely pass data back and forth from this external service and this API without having to expose it to the larger internet. And there's a number of different products that we have at Vercel that can kind of help with this too. So feel free to reach out to us at vercel.com/contact/sales. And I think that is all of our questions. I know we're a little bit over. This was an incredible time. Thank you all for your energy and your focus and your attention. Let me see. There's one more question. Yes, thanks, Jasper. Thanks for your time. Reach out to us and we'll answer your questions too. I think we can kind of come up with some ideas. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time. I'll go ahead and wrap us up and look forward to hearing from you all again. Thanks.